Let's go over Booleans and Zbrush and kind of how to work non-destructively, efficiently, and keep everything in a kind of neatly and organized so we can work in a good way. So let's bring in a cylinder. We'll make a very basic example here, go through the entire mid-poly creation, and then export the Zbrush, do some stuff there as well. Keep some tricks in mind. First things first, your sides, keep them high, especially at this stage. It doesn't matter if it's too high, higher is better, right? 200 is actually the max even here. So for cylindrical details or for stuff with curvature, keep the segment count high. If you're combining subdivision modeling or third person, right, with this workflow, that's possible as well. Just kind of keep that in mind. High poly count is better for this stage. But of course, with subdiv, keep your cage in mind. Don't make that too high poly so you don't have a lot of work to do when you go to your low poly, right? So yeah. Now, I want to have a very big bevel or chamfer on here, which is not possible in Zbrush, or it's going to be a lot of work. I kind of want to do it here non-destructively, right? So what can I do? I can go over here, turn this to add a modifier as edit poly, because else we can't change the segment count afterwards, right? And I can select this face, add a chamfer modifier, and do something like this. There you go. Right, so let's get a second cylinder in here, and I can kind of show you stuff to keep in mind when you're building up your Boolean operands. So, to keep in mind with them is you do not want, first of all, what you saw me do in the beginning there, you do not want coplanar geometry. It means that these two faces, you can see it here, they're in the exact same plane. That's bad. That will confuse the Boolean algorithm. ProBoolean is better at avoiding it, but in general, just be clean about it. Don't. It's shitty to have to go back and figure out which one is really causing your issues, right? Second thing is, I just add edit poly here again, is you want to have watertight meshes. What does that mean? You want to avoid stuff like this. Meshes with holes in them where the software can't tell what is the inside or the outside. To it, it's just one continuous surface, right? You can't really tell. So avoid that. Secondly, avoid having intersecting geometry in a single operand. So this one object is a single operand. So I do something like this. No, that's actually bad in multiple ways. I have coplanar geometry and I have intersecting geometry within a single operand. Sometimes it will deal with that just fine, other times it won't. Try and avoid it. Try and see if you can't make this two separate operands that are linked if you want it to be exactly the same, or some other way to kind of avoid self-intersecting geometry, right? Those are things to kind of keep in mind. Alright, so now we can go back to this one. Compound objects, pro Boolean, start picking. You have all these different modes. Subtraction is the one you'll usually be using probably. And there we go. Alright, perfect. So if you want to go back, we can always do display operands, select one we need, go here and adjust, for example, the cylinder count on it, right? For low poly, but also for maybe we did a test of this and this was actually not detailed enough, whatever, right? Keep that in mind. Alright. So we can go back to pro Boolean, display like that, and then afterwards we could just export this like this to Zbrush. It would get confused by the n-gons and stuff, so we'll use a turn to poly modifier to get rid of those. Turn to poly. Object selections, clear those, we don't need them anymore. Limit polygon size to 4 or to 3, doesn't really matter, right? Triangulation is also fine, doesn't matter at this step, right? So, and you can just export selected or however you want to do it to FBX and put that into ZBrush. Now, as an example, I will use a more complex file. Actually, I'll show it in Blender real quick. I made a similar example, kind of a knob, just to show how it works in Blender as well, right? If you need to kind of, for example, get this detail around all of these multiple times around this cylindrical part, you may want to get the array modifier add-on from Max. I'll link it in the description of this video. That means you have a live modifier like these chamfers, right, where you can say, oh, I have 8 of them right now, maybe I want 6 instead, right, which I'll show in Blender right now, which doesn't need it. But it does need different add-ons, so it's a give and take situation. So in Blender, Blender does not really have parametric objects currently. I think there's actually maybe an early version of it, but there's a great add-on called Wonder Mesh, which I'll again link, which just gives you max style functionality, being able to go back into the mesh data and change all of these parameters, like, the amount of segments and stuff. So here we're using an array modifier on this that is using an offset empty that's been rotated by a second empty as an object offset, right here, and then that just rotated around 8 times. Let's say I want to have it 6 instead. I can change the amount of it here. I can go back to the rotation here, and I can say 60. Now it's 6, right? So there's some really powerful stuff you can do with that. Let's say it's 6. I'll quickly show as well here how to get that nice round bevel. Chamfer, I'll mark these edges, mean bevel weight, add a bevel modifier here, limit method weight, up the size of it, add the segment count, and there you go. Right? So then, last things for this is you would probably need the Bool tool add-on. It's included with Blender, Control-Shift-B, and you get this kind of menu, so you can select these, select the main object, Control-Shift-B. Difference, a brush means it's a live boolean, you can still adjust, so prefer using that for this workflow, right? And you get this nice looking thing, right? And then here as well, you want to either, if you have lots of modifiers, use convert to mesh, right? And it just gets rid of these. Now it's an actual mesh. Select all, Control T to triangulate, Alt J to get rid of, to kind of make quads where possible, and then export this, right? Which we will quickly do. Export to FBX. Alright, let's see where we can probably just do this real quick. Desktop, and we'll say, test. I have a preset where it says only selected meshes, and it doesn't applies modifiers as well if I have them, which can maybe be handier if you're using a mirror or whatever, right? You don't have to apply it before exporting, you can keep it live in your file. The same thing it applies to the FBX exporter for Macs, right? So export that, and we'll open Zbrush and see how this looks in there. Also, make sure your normals are good, right? These are all blue, that's good. If it's red, it's bad. There are certain features in Macs for this as well. Let's keep it in mind because Zbrush gets confused by it, right? So let's minimize this. Let's go to Zbrush, and we can import the FBX from our desktop left here, desktop test.fbx. Look at this pop-up, ignore all of that, we don't need it. It will import every separate object out of the export as a separate subtool, which is great, obviously. So here we can see, put a polyframe right. All right. So now, let's go and do the Dynamesh trick. The step, sorry. Dynamesh. Usually higher is going to be nicer. Just kind of mess with it. 1K, 2K, 4K is what I usually need. Let's try 1K. Dynamesh. Probably going to be too little, is my guess. It's also going to get stuck because I'm recording, of course. Alright. Oh yeah, there you go. 1K was good for this. Alright, so 1K is good. Now, before we start the polishing step, I'm going to do, let's see if I can do this easily. I want to kind of show how to retain detail real quick. I'll just show you. So, if you have like very small detail that just gets kind of muddy when you do the polish step, before doing polishing, get a morph target, store it, and then you can go to deformation, polish. Polish is like not that one. Okay. So we'll polish it like super hard here, for example. Give it a second, right? And never use 100. That's almost always too much. Values like 40, 30, or 20 usually are fine. Let's say this is perfect for this example, right? But this is too soft, or it has destroyed some like very small chamfers I had in here, or I had some buttons, whatever. I can use the morph brush to paint in my crispness back. You can do that, or what you can also do is before you do the polish, you can mask out an area you don't want to get all soft, which I'll show actually by doing it here, right? Mask it, polish it, give it a second again. So usually this polishing and this masking step is not needed for some examples like the camera you might have seen. I needed to do that. I won't load up that file because it's quite heavy while recording it. This is already 3 million triangles, maybe a bit too much for this. So I can now invert my mask. You see this is still quite crisp, and I can polish this a bit less, like 20 for example, to retain the detail on smaller parts, right? So you can either use the Morph Target brush if you prefer using that, but you have to remember to store Morph Target before polishing at all, right? Or you can use this masking, whichever you prefer, right? Whichever gives you more control over what you want to do. So now I can clear my mask, and you can see it looks like that. And you can then clean up the dividing line, smaller brush, by holding Shift and just smoothing it out. Again, here this is a bad example where it's not working well, right? Because these are continuous curves, so that the line is going to be obvious always. But there are examples like very small buttons with a button here or some kind of modeled in screw, which you would kind of lose detail there, right? That. Also for baking and also just in general for mostly for baking, honestly, keep as many objects separately as you can. It's totally okay. Though it does take longer. You have to go through each subtool, subdivide it, sorry, dynamesh it, then polish it, maybe do some cleanup with the Morph Target brush or with the by masking stuff out first, which is not for most parts. Like I had to do it on one part, if I remember right. But in general, just kind of keep as many as you need. And then after this step, right, you can always go back to your low poly. Right here, I can go into this, which is now turned into a wireframe. Right, that thing. I can go to its Wonder Mesh options, and I can change the segmentations to like something like 10, for example. So yeah, 10, right? I already converted it to. Oh, there you go. But no, that kind of workflow. So keep backup files. For example, I don't have one here. Keep a backup of the live Boolean object, right? So that you can go back into your operands. That's what we call each of these objects, and change the segmentations on the cylinders, for example, or whatever, and kind of get this kind of detail back. So with that chamfer trick, for example, what you can do, it's a quick showcase. I might do this on, you can do it on W2, but then again, right, you're gonna lose some, you can maybe redo some stuff. It's the same in Max as well. So I'm gonna add quickly an extra segment here. I'm gonna this, and for example, I want to do something like this. You would probably do this with a cone that's been booleans together with this, and then maybe just dynamesh it. But in this example, right, I can select this mean bevel weight and do bevel by weight, right, something like that, for example, right. You can also use deformation modifiers. There's the FFD and Max. There's the KH. What's it called? Several deform modifiers in Blender you can use for it as well to get this. And then, for example, I don't know, stick it in there and just Boolean that together. Booleans in Blender right now, the new ones are a bit iffy, so they can be a bit wonky, but this looks okay. Yeah, see, that's gorgeous, right? Isn't it? Yeah. But for example, this also happens in Max. If you're using the chamfer trick I showed you there, if I go in here now and I change the segment count, oh yeah, it's not that one, sorry. That's also the W mesh element in this one, yeah. If I change the segment count, it's all that work is gone. So you need to kind of work uh, uh, with primitives as much as possible, or with modifiers that change stuff. In Max, you can use an edit poly modifier, for example, to kind of work around that, but even then, you can run into issues like the vertex order changing and stuff like that. But in general, right, that's the idea of kind of getting this. The nice thing about the workflow is so you don't need to worry about support loops most of the time, unless you're also combining parts of that workflow, the subdivision workflow, and you can just mush things together and you just instantly get what you need. As a quick example, just open up, this is the block up real quick so we can see here, right? This is mushed together, just kind of squished, and here, look, nothing, absolutely zero issues with it. This was too low poly, I had to change that. again, look here, so many overlapping stuff. Actually, in the low poly, wasn't that much work to actually fix that either, because the booleans behaved really well on this one. But you can see, so it overlaps there, and if you go to the high poly, nothing, absolutely no issues there. Yeah, just as an example. You can, for example, see here, well, I messed it up here, but you might need to go for some higher segment counts. You need to fix this later on as well, right? So kind of keep things as live as possible. I never ran into the issues I just spoke of, right, with this reverting. I did not run into that issue with this specific project, which is also my background here. um, but you might, right, if it's a bit of a complex object. So try and think of, instead of doing, I'm going to delete all of this, instead of doing, right, like adding in edge loops manually or doing stuff like this, think of how can I build this up out of a cone with a cylinder rammed through it, and how big does this bevel need to be? If it needs to really be that big, you may want to consider doing it as subdivisions, right? Or with crease sets, right? For example, if I throw a division on here and you have crease sets, look into those for max, because I really don't know how to use them. I can use crease sets right here to do this kind of magic. Right, there you go, I just made the thing I just did, but this is way more controllable. I can say, okay, I know in my low poly this part is going to be, viewed from like this close, so I know my base geometry needs to have at least 64 segments, for example, right? And my subdivision can just be this for my high poly and baking and all that stuff, right? So think about it in that way, sort of. And you get very nice results very quickly. The camera you saw, maybe a while back, that took like 90 hours, but this took 13 hours to model. And I think a few extra to like do the low poly. So 13 for high poly and mid poly, another 10 for low poly, right? So it can be very quick. And even that actually is kind of slow for by industry standards, I guess. I think I'm quite slow. So you get the idea, right? I hope that kind of helps. Any more questions, or if you want to convert to Blender, let me know. Check the links in the description again for the array modifier for Max, definitely. And if you're using Blender, use Wonder Mesh. It is amazing with the new Booleans in Blender. Take care, have fun with it. Wish you good luck.